and the elevator mirrors at 2:04 a.m. We did look away. I am not jealous of bodies. I am jealous of angles. Bodies are honest when you let them be. Angles choose the story. At 2:04 a.m., the elevator of the Mirabelle had 4 mirrors and a grudge. I stood in one corner and tried to be a person rather than a reflection, but the car kept multiplying me and Marco until we were a chorus of men pretending not to read one another. He pressed the button for the roof with his thumb like a secret. Behind him, a stranger leaned against the panel and watched the floors light up the way a lover counts days by their shadows. Marco said it was a residency mixer, that irritating phrase for a party that wants to be a workshop. He had a badge that identified him as Marco Sound and a smile that identified him as Trouble. We had been together long enough to borrow one another's shirts and apologies. I felt the hotel's air conditioning trim the edges of my fear. He had texted earlier something lazy. Stay up. I'll have noise to bring home. I stayed up. Noise arrived wearing a linen jacket and a name that caught on my teeth. Raphael. He said it like a dare in 2 syllables, and the second landed in the place where trouble practices its balance. He was the stranger in the elevator, except he wasn't strange to Marco. They had a rhythm in the thin space between them, a choreography of almosts. I wanted to be generous because I'm better at generosity than courage. The doors opened onto a roof crowded with lights and the absence of stars. The city below made its own constellations, taxis, sirens, windows that believed in insomnia on purpose. The bartender on the terrace asked if we liked our nights neat or complicated. I said neat, which is how cowards audition for romance. Marco said complicated and Raphael laughed, and that sound pinned me to my side of the railing. If a man can divide himself, I did. The polite version of me spoke to a curator about tinny projectors and the ethics of found sound. The other version watched Marco's hand float toward Raphael's sleeve and hover like a chord that knows it could resolve and decides not to. Marco and I aren't saints. We are 2 men who wanted to become a room and then discovered rooms come with windows. We had rules written in our cruel neat handwriting and attached to the fridge with a magnet shaped like an orange. The rules were unremarkable until they were the only religion left in the apartment. We broke them in small ways because small ways make an excellent costume for hunger. I watched a lock of Raphael's hair fall across his forehead the way a door learns to close itself better. He drifted toward me eventually. Raphael did, the way weather moves and pretends it has nowhere else to be. He said he had heard my mixes, which is the kind of flirting that refuses to admit it's already in your pocket. His voice was lower than the music and more persistent. He asked if I ever threw away what I couldn't fix. I told him I kept a graveyard folder on my desktop for clips that resisted salvation. He said he wanted to live there for a while. He said it with his mouth and with his wrist, and with the distance he kept between us that would have been laughable if it hadn't already turned my knees into an alibi. Marco arrived with 2 drinks, placed one in Raphael's hand and one in mine, and gave me the face he uses when he believes we are grown and the room has finally agreed. My face wanted to stay 24 for 5 more minutes. We stood together in a triangle that did not once pretend to be a line. The night had the intimacy of a rumor everybody likes. Raphael told a story about a boy who fell in love with a scaffolding because it was the only thing taller than his fear. He told it with his eyes on me and his mouth on Marco's laugh. I stepped away because stepping away is my talent. Down one floor, a corridor lined with conference rooms that had names like promises written in soft fonts. I leaned against carpet that swallowed footsteps for a living and tried to breathe without teaching the hotel anything about me. The door next to me opened, and a woman in a server's jacket asked if I needed directions. I said yes, because I needed to learn how to want something simple. She pointed to the elevators, and I said thank you, as if gratitude were a way to pay a debt I hadn't yet acquired. They found me there, both of them, trafficking in silence. Marco's hand landed on the square of my back where propriety and ownership shake hands. Raphael stood slightly behind him, a crescent moon willing to make everything someone else's tide. Marco said the word studio like it was a place, not a problem, and Raphael said the word later with the patience of habitual sinners. I chose to be reckless with something small. I followed them into the elevator, one mirror for each of us, one angle that told the truth and three that asked for extensions. The 20th floor housed a lounge with red couches and a window the size of a moral. Marco sat, Raphael sat. I stood because standing felt like a job. I wanted to touch the place on Marco's wrist where his veins wrote the day in fine blue script. I wanted to touch the place on Raphael's throat where the night had made a home. The room made a choreography of our want and offered no music. Marco asked Raphael which city had taught him to cheat first. Raphael said Barcelona, then revised it to adolescence, then laughed at the way his mouth knew how to rehearse. I called the laugh a key to distract myself from the fact that my hand had already found the lock. The first brush of skin was an accident we auditioned for. Raphael reached past me to set his glass down, and his fingers sketched along my abdomen through the shirt, as if taking a measurement that clothing had refused to learn. Marco watched and did nothing because doing nothing is sometimes a kink for men like us. I closed my eyes and opened my mouth and said something about the mix, about a bridge that refused its duty. Raphael said some bridges are better as doors. He said it to both of us, and he didn't have to say it twice. I would like to say I left then. I would like to say I kept the promise we wrote on the fridge like a good indictment. What I did was close the distance until Raphael's breath forgot the room and learned my name. I kissed him and the hotel believed in us for half a second. His mouth tasted like citrus and rehearsal. Marco stayed close enough that his knee pressed my thigh, and the mirror reflected the version of us that would have made my mother leave early. I kissed Marco then, because a life can hold two truths if you are careless enough and doing your best. We did not break the bed, because we are men with manners and the hotel had earned none of the damage we wanted to do to ourselves. We used mouths and hands like gentlemen with ruin in mind. There's a way to touch a shoulder that makes a person remember who they were when they were new. I pressed my palm to Raphael's chest and learned his rhythm. Marco laughed into my cheek, and the night forgave him out loud. The light from the window made a map out of rooms we didn't have time to visit. After, we talked like professionals whose bodies had been on loan. Raphael told us the story about the scaffolding again, only this time the boy lived, and it was less convincing and more true. Marco said he was tired of writing bridges for songs that didn't deserve destinations. I told them if I kept a graveyard folder for kisses, this one would be a mausoleum with decent hymns. Raphael looked at me like he could sing in any key and chose mine to be polite. Marco laced his fingers with mine the way a promise releases itself from court and goes home. The morning arrived before we finished deciding who we were. Raphael left through a door that knew better than to squeal. Marco and I took the elevator down with a silence that wasn't cruel, only heavy. The lobby had the hangover of good carpets. We put our mouths on coffee to make them useful and found a corner where our faces could decide how to behave. Marco said he loved me with the voice he uses when fixing things, and I believed him because belief is a muscle you exercise or lose. I said I loved him with the voice I use in editing bays at 3 a.m., calm against all good evidence. We both nodded as if a jury had been given the instruction and could go now. The ride home was a gloved thing. The city did its part by being banal. Keys in the lock at 9:08, the polite tone of our door clearing its throat. The apartment smelled like toast it hadn't earned. We stood in the kitchen and looked at the orange magnet that holds our rules and pretends to know our names. We didn't add a new line. We didn't erase an old one. We let the rules watch us the way a dog watches hands, a little betrayed, a lot loyal. I went for a walk because the room knew too much. The street made an honest noise. In a shop window I saw us 2 nights ago, some other life where I put my mouth on Marco's and we went to sleep and woke up and nothing had a plot. Raphael existed there too, I suppose, but somewhere else, inside somebody else's school of almosts. A bus sighed at a curb and made a sound like a judge disappointed with his own robe. When I came back, the kettle had already declared 7:05 in whatever time zone the brave live in. We tried to make lunch like adults. Marco chopped and didn't bleed, which felt like an achievement. I set plates the way incurable romantics set stages. When he reached to pass the salt, his wrist brushed mine and the room leaned toward us. The room will do that forever, lean. That's its job. I will do what I can do, which is put water on and move the chair and ask why before who, then put my hand flat on the table and wait for the key in the lock even when we're both standing in the kitchen. If I am supposed to regret the elevator, the roof, the lounge, the bed we didn't ruin, I can't. Regret is a costume we wear for the neighbors. What I feel most strongly is the shape of that mirror in which I saw 3 men and a choice and decided, for once, to be a person rather than a verdict. It is not noble. It is not awful. It is only true and therefore expensive. Tonight I will not open Hidden. I will not study timestamps like their horoscopes. I will not give the hotel a religion. I will film the coffee at 7:05 and caption it here, because words like addresses. Maybe we will touch in ways that remind rather than convince. Maybe I will tell Marco I am not sorry enough yet to be forgiven. Maybe he will tell me he wants to write a bridge that doesn't lead anywhere and sit down with me in the middle of it for a very long time. If another night offers us the kind of proof that doesn't help, an angle that chooses a story over a person, a laugh that practices in the wrong room, a code that thinks it earned the key, I hope I do the humiliating, useful things that kept us almost honest. Put water on. Move the chair. Ask why before who. Wait for the lock to clear its throat like a trustworthy throat should. Let the photos keep their edges. Let the city keep its constellation of places that believe in mercy for a price. Let us keep being the address, or if not the address, at least the map that knows how to admit when it's wrong and still get you home.